Until you witness your impulses, they will appear to choose you. Carl Jung. What if the very moment you awaken is the moment lust grows the strongest? What if the thing you thought you'd transcend is actually the first thing that rises to meet you? And what if this isn't failure, but the hidden doorway every ancient mystic had to cross? You're about to see why the spiritually awake feel desire more intensely than anyone else, and why that truth is never spoken out loud. Hold this line: what comes next flips everything you've believed about temptation and consciousness. When awakening quietly begins, the world doesn't turn softer, it turns sharper. Colors stop behaving like background and start feeling like messages. A simple breeze across the skin suddenly carries memory, meaning, almost a voice. It's as if someone walked into a dark room in your chest and switched on every light at once. You're not imagining it, your system is finally registering what was always there. At the same time, the inner sense of presence grows heavier, almost tangible. You feel watched, not by people, but by something vast looking through your eyes. That same awareness that tastes silence also starts noticing the body with uncomfortable clarity. A look, a scent, a small touch that once seemed innocent now lands like a spark on dry wood. Spirit and flesh start sharing the same spotlight, and that double exposure can be exhausting. Most seekers expect this path to feel like sinking into a warm bath of peace. Instead, it feels like walking into a city of emotions at rush hour. Joy, grief, beauty, longing, attraction, everything moves at once, everything has a face. Your nervous system stops numbing itself with noise, so even a passing thought or fantasy hits with more voltage. Nothing inside you is on mute anymore, and that's both liberating and deeply unsettling. You may notice it in tiny, almost embarrassing moments. A stranger's gaze lingers half a second longer and your whole body reacts. A line in a movie, a piece of music, a memory from years ago, and suddenly you're flooded with tenderness and hunger at the same time. What used to be a small flicker of feeling now roars like a scene in a film. You're watching yourself more closely, and in that watching, every impulse steps forward. This is why, for the spiritually awake, desire doesn't disappear, it steps into high definition. The same light that reveals subtle truth also illuminates the most human urges without mercy. Nothing is hidden, not even from you. And as this sensitivity grows, the question stops being, why do I feel so much, and slowly turns into, what does it really mean that I feel this strongly at all? Desire often grows louder right when someone believes they should be transcending it. It feels like a betrayal of the path, as if awakening should bleach the body clean. But when awareness expands, it doesn't remove instinct, it simply removes the fog that used to blur it. You're finally seeing what was always moving beneath the surface. Before awakening, most impulses stayed half buried under habit, distraction, and emotional noise. You felt hunger without noticing it, attraction without naming it, loneliness without understanding it. Once consciousness sharpens, those same currents become visible in full detail. Nothing is diluted anymore, not even the parts you'd prefer to outgrow. It's not a fall from grace, it's the first time you've been present enough to witness the entire spectrum of your own humanity. Desire becomes clear, not because you're regressing, but because your perception is no longer filtered. You're awake inside the experience rather than sleepwalking through it. Awareness makes the body honest. Some people panic when this intensity rises, assuming it means they're failing spiritually. But a system that feels more is a system that's functioning, not collapsing. Think of it like stepping into a room where the lights were dim for years. The details don't appear out of nowhere. The illumination finally catches up to them. The body is simply telling the truth louder now. And as this truth comes into focus, something else becomes noticeable, the emotional charge braided into desire itself. It's not just physical pull, it's memory, longing, and unresolved echoes all woven together. That recognition quietly leads into the next movement of this journey, what awakening does to your relationship with people, closeness, and belonging. As awareness deepens, the world you once fit into starts feeling strangely distant. Conversations that used to entertain now slide off your mind like mist. People speak in circles, repeat cliches, defend illusions you can no longer participate in. You're still in the room, but something inside you steps a few feet back. This distance isn't superiority, it's incompatibility. Awakening shifts your emotional frequency, and most environments simply don't match it. Small talk becomes tiring, noise becomes abrasive, and superficial exchanges feel like eating air. You begin craving depth without knowing where to find it. And that craving quietly becomes its own ache. There's a moment when the loneliness hits with surprising force. Not because you're alone, but because very few people can meet you where you now stand. You sense everything: tension in voices, fractures in relationships, motives behind actions. Seeing so much makes connection harder, not easier. Presence stops being a comfort and starts being a mirror. In that mirror, you notice how hunger for resonance starts to bleed into hunger for touch. When emotional belonging feels scarce, the body tries to compensate. A warm glance or a casual connection feels amplified, almost intoxicating. You're not seeking pleasure, you're seeking a moment where the distance disappears, even briefly. And it's exactly in this gap, between spiritual clarity and human loneliness, that the next temptation emerges. The body begins offering shortcuts to connection, urges that feel like bridges but rarely hold weight. Which brings you to the next layer of this path, the way lust disguises itself as intimacy. If this is hitting close to home, take a second, like the video, subscribe, and stay with me. What comes next goes even deeper. Isolation makes the body speak louder than usual. When you've been drifting in a kind of spiritual altitude where few can join you, even small moments of human warmth feel exaggerated. A hand brushing yours, a voice softening, a look lasting a second too long, everything lands with amplified meaning. The body interprets this as closeness, and closeness becomes a promise. But lust offers a shortcut that looks like connection only from far away. Up close, it's a borrowed light, warm, bright, comforting, but never stable. You step into someone's arms and feel the loneliness melt for a moment, only to feel it return sharper when the moment ends. The illusion isn't in the touch, it's in what the touch pretends to solve. This is why lust feels so tempting to the spiritually awake. You see through the world's illusions, but you still bleed like everyone else. And the body knows how to offer quick relief, a rush of chemistry, a feeling of being wanted, the brief quieting of questions you don't want to face. It's not intimacy you're chasing, it's anesthesia. The emptiness that follows isn't moral judgment, it's simple physics. When you use the body to solve a spiritual hunger, the equation never balances. You may feel held, desired, even understood for a heartbeat, but nothing inside you actually shifts. You return to yourself unchanged, and that unchanged state feels colder than before. And as this cycle repeats, something becomes clear: lust isn't the enemy, but it's not the bridge it pretends to be. It reveals the hunger but doesn't feed it. And the moment you sense that truth, another force begins moving beneath the surface, the one that reacts whenever your consciousness rises. The moment consciousness expands, something in the unseen architecture of your mind pushes back. Old patterns don't dissolve quietly, they recoil. Thoughts that used to feel harmless suddenly become sharper, more intrusive, more urgent. It's not sabotage, it's the inertia of a system that doesn't yet understand who you're becoming. Awakening disturbs the familiar. You may notice that the deeper your presence grows, the more chaotic certain impulses become. It's like stirring a riverbed, the water gets cloudier before it clears. Suddenly cravings intensify, fantasies multiply, doubts grow teeth. These reactions aren't proof of failure, they're proof that awareness is reaching areas that were once untouched. The shadows respond to the light. Lust becomes one of the easiest tools for this resistance to use. Not because it's evil, but because it demands your attention instantly. It pulls the mind into urgency, into imagination, into a future moment you can chase but not inhabit. Presence collapses in a heartbeat. That collapse is the resistance trying to keep you in familiar territory. And the timing is rarely random. You'll notice that these waves strike hardest when you're on the verge of a breakthrough, right after a profound insight, right before a moment of clarity, right when peace begins settling in your body. The instinctive pull back into distraction is almost surgical. Something in you fears what expansion requires. Yet underneath the chaos, there's a quiet intelligence revealing itself. Resistance is not a punishment, it's a signpost showing where your consciousness is landing next. And the moment you see that clearly, another layer of this journey rises to the surface, the old wounds that awakening refuses to leave buried. Awakening has a way of lighting up the places you hoped would stay dim. Old memories surface without invitation, the rejection you brushed aside, the shame you buried, the moments you never processed. They rise because awareness stops protecting you from yourself. What was quiet becomes loud, and what was distant becomes intimate again. These wounds don't return to punish you, they return because they finally have space to breathe. When consciousness grows, suppression can't survive in the same environment. Suddenly you feel the weight behind your reactions, the story beneath your insecurities, the childhood echoes hiding inside adult desires. Nothing stays disguised. Awareness unravels the old knots. In this emotional movement, lust often appears as the quickest escape route. The body knows how to flood you with sensation strong enough to blur the pain for a moment. Feeling wanted becomes a temporary antidote to feeling unworthy. A touch, a fantasy, a moment of validation softens the ache. But the relief evaporates the moment the distraction ends. This is why the spiritually awake often feel torn. On one side, a rising clarity that wants to heal, on the other, an old ache begging for a shortcut out of discomfort. You're not craving pleasure, you're craving a moment where the wound stops screaming. Lust offers that silence, but it cannot sustain it. It only resets the cycle. And as these inner patterns unfold, a deeper tension begins to form, one that goes beyond pain and enters the delicate territory of spiritual sensitivity itself. Because the more open you become, the more vulnerable you are to every sensation, including desire. The more spiritually perceptive you become, the thinner the veil between inner and outer worlds feels. Intuition sharpens, empathy widens, subtle energies register instantly. But that same openness makes the body more reactive. A simple moment of attraction feels deeper, heavier, almost symbolic. Sensitivity becomes both a gift and a doorway. You may notice this especially during moments of clarity. When your mind is quiet and your perception expands, even a small emotional signal hits with full intensity. A glance, a tone, a shift in someone's presence, all of it lands inside you without filters. What used to be a whisper becomes a chord, and the body reacts before you can negotiate with it. This creates a tension that has existed for mystics across centuries. The higher the awareness, the stronger the grounding pull. Spirit stretches upward, but the body pulls downward with equal force, insisting on its place in the experience. The contrast can be startling. It's not hypocrisy, it's the human architecture revealing itself. People rarely talk about how spiritually gifted individuals often feel desire more intensely than others. The nervous system is open, the intuition is active, the emotional field is porous. Desire doesn't enter quietly, it arrives like a visitor who knows the door is already unlocked. And because everything is amplified, it becomes harder to ignore. As this sensitivity deepens, the balance between body and spirit becomes essential. Ignoring one side destabilizes the other. And that imbalance leads into another pattern seekers often miss, the way neglecting the physical self accidentally intensifies what they're trying to transcend. Many seekers try to rise above the body by ignoring it, imagining that discipline alone can silence instinct. But the body doesn't disappear when you overlook it, it compensates. Fatigue, hunger, loneliness, creative stagnation, lack of touch, all of it gathers in the background. And when the pressure builds, desire becomes louder than it needs to be. Lust often spikes not because the spirit is weak, but because the body is underfed in simple ways. A restless night, a day without movement, too much isolation, these small imbalances distort instinct. The body begins searching for quick fuel, mistaking emotional emptiness for physical craving. It asks for sensation when what it really needed was care. This is why spiritual sensitivity becomes tricky. You feel more, so any neglected need becomes amplified. What used to be a manageable wave suddenly feels like a storm. And the storm isn't about temptation, it's about imbalance. A well-rested, nourished, connected body is far less reactive. Care becomes a form of clarity. Sometimes the most spiritual act is not meditation but grounding yourself through simple human rituals. A walk, a meal, sunlight, creative expression, meaningful conversation. These small anchors settle the nervous system and soften the intensity. The body stops shouting when it realizes you're finally listening. Awareness begins to breathe again. And as the body steadies, another truth becomes visible. Desire grows wildest in isolation, where silence turns into pressure and secrecy becomes fuel. Which leads naturally into the next layer of this journey, how connection breaks the spell. Lust grows strongest in the corners where no one is watching, not because it's shameful, but because silence creates pressure. When the mind has no outlet, the imagination fills the gap. Thoughts loop, emotions swell, and instinct begins to inflate itself beyond proportion. Isolation becomes the stage where desire performs without interruption. You've probably noticed this, the moments of greatest intensity usually happen when you feel unseen. Not judged, simply unseen. Human beings aren't built to carry their entire inner world alone. When no one reflects you, your impulses become their own ecosystem. They grow unchecked, like vines in a locked room. Secrecy adds another layer. Keeping desire hidden gives it a kind of electricity. It becomes charged, private, almost sacred in a distorted way. The more you conceal, the more the mind fixates. Not out of moral failing, but because the nervous system treats secrecy as significance. What isn't spoken becomes amplified. The interesting thing is how quickly the cycle weakens when shared with even one trustworthy person. Not in confession as punishment, but in simple human honesty. Being seen dissolves the pressure that secrecy built. The fantasy loses its voltage. The emotion loses its edge. Connection works like ventilation. The room becomes breathable again. And once that space opens, something deeper emerges. The realization that desire only dominates when you merge with it. When you stop identifying with the feeling, its grip loosens. Which brings you naturally to the final movement of this journey, meeting desire without becoming it. There comes a moment when desire stops being a threat and becomes a teacher. Not because it softens, but because you're finally able to watch it without being swallowed. Awareness shifts from "I am this feeling" to "I am the one noticing it." And the distance created by that shift is the beginning of mastery. You're no longer inside the wave, you're observing the tide. When an impulse rises, staying still for even a few breaths changes the entire landscape. The urgency loosens. The story behind the craving becomes visible. You see the childhood echo, the loneliness, the old pain trying to express itself. The moment you stop running from it, it stops controlling you. Presence becomes a quiet form of strength. Healing starts when you move toward the wound instead of away from it. Not through analysis, but through honesty. This hurts. This scares me. This is mine. The feeling loses its sharpness when it's allowed to exist. What once drove you now reveals itself as something much simpler than the fantasies you built around it. Awareness does the dissolving. Non-identification doesn't mean cold detachment. It means holding both truths at once, "I feel this" and "I am not this." The desire comes, burns, cools, and leaves, and you remain. The sky doesn't become the storm just because it's passing through. And the more you witness this directly, the less intimidated you are by your own intensity. This is the quiet turning point of the journey. The moment desire stops dragging you and starts showing you the parts of yourself still waiting to be integrated. And from here, the path deepens into the heart of the video, the opening, where the core promise of this entire exploration begins to take shape. Awakening doesn't make you less human, it makes you transparent to yourself. The same light that expands your spirit also exposes the desires you once hid. When you stop fighting them and simply breathe with what rises, something inside you steadies. Clarity isn't born from control, but from presence. If this touched something real in you, stay close. Subscribe so these teachings keep reaching you, not by accident but by intention. And if this brought insight, share it with someone who's walking through the same invisible fire. Before you go, tell me, what shifted in you while listening? And when you're ready, the next video on your screen continues exactly where this awakening leaves you.